This is a republic, if you can keep it, with Mark Brewer and Jeff Timmer.
I'm Mark Brewer. Welcome to the homestretch episode of A Republic If You Can Keep It. We're in the final days of a primary campaign that's being watched by the nation. In fact, some of my friends overseas are even paying attention. Will the Democratic Socialist wing of the Democratic Party upset the so-called centrist leadership? It's topic number one this week and probably next week.
I'm Jeff Timmer. Donald Trump's approval rating is now officially in the deep freeze. 32% approval in the last Quinnipiac poll. There are STDs like gonorrhea and chlamydia that are more popular than Donald Trump is right now. So Trump and his allies are rolling out more distractions, as is their pattern. A Just for Fox News Senate interrogation of Dr. Anthony Fauci, with Fauci refusing to take Rand Paul's bait and taking the fifth more than 100 times. It really seems like political malpractice for Rand Paul and Trump and the Republicans to want to relitigate Trump's astounding incompetence and failure during COVID. When people aren't thinking about that right now, add that to the mix in the issues that Trump comes out on the wrong side of and Republicans will pay the price for in November. And then there was a meandering monologue campaign rally, a taxpayer-funded campaign rally assisted by General Motors in Southeast Michigan, which included a long litany of Trump distortions, lies, name callings, and buffoonery.
We are doing unbelievably well as a country. You had a leader, I don't know if he's still with you, Sean Fain or something. This guy was bad news. I never spoke to him, never saw him. He was a Democrat. I've done more for you than your parents, okay? What's better, sleepy Joe Biden or crooked Joe Biden? We're running against communists. You see what they want to do? They want to take your houses. They want to take your money. They want to raise your tax up to 80%. 1 year ago, our country was dead, and now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. They want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender mutilization of your children. We're having the single greatest year we've ever had as a country. We're hot. Jobs are up. Inflation is down. Our border is secure. Factories are opening at record levels. Investment is booming. America is winning like never before. So, ladies and gentlemen of Michigan, the golden age of America is upon us. We're in the golden age. This is an age like no other.
Democrats are openly celebrating Trump's campaign appearance. It gave them yet another opportunity to focus on Trump's core failures. Michigan Democratic Party Chair Curtis Hertel led the party's Welcome to Michigan, Donald press conference.
Trump promised to end inflation on day one. Instead, the cost of groceries, housing, utilities have all gone up under his watch. He promised that there would be no more wars. Instead, he started a reckless war in Iran and caused Michigan gas prices to skyrocket to nearly $5 a gallon. He promised he wouldn't cut Americans' health care. Instead, his party cut $1 trillion from Medicaid and spiked premiums for hundreds of thousands of Michiganders. He promised to stand by working people. Instead, Republicans enacted the largest transfer of wealth to the ultra-rich in the history of the United States. Trump has betrayed Michiganders, and Republicans like Mike Rogers, John James, and Matt Hall have stood by him every step of the way.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to promise that all things will get much better quickly. Of course, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was saying the same thing just 6 months ago.
I think we're going to grow more than 5% GDP this quarter, and that's for the $30 trillion U.S. economy. And if rates were lower, you would see us hit 6%.
The real number in terms of growth has not been 5 or 6%, but a tiny, almost invisible 1.5%.
In the background, Democrats are assuming, and we've been saying for 2 years, that Donald Trump will use all of the federal government power to interfere with a fair and free election in November. Senator Alyssa Slotkin says a Trump-led chaos and confusion campaign is inevitable.
When he wins, the elections were great. But when he loses, they're all fake. And he's building a case. And part of that is what he's doing with the U.S. Postal Service, trying to limit who can send in mail-in ballots. He's giving these addresses. He's gutting the VRA. He's doing all of these things. And I think what it tends to culminate in, this authoritarian playbook, it culminates in him creating a security incident that requires uniformed military or federal law enforcement to go to the polls, to surround polls, to collect ballots, or voting machines. And I think we need to be clear-eyed about that he is laying out this playbook ahead of November. And so we don't need to pick on each little thing that he does. We need to stand back from 40,000 feet and see what's happening.
Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, the Dems candidate for Secretary of State, is part of the team working on Trump-proofing Michigan's election.
The federal government, the Trump administration, the Trump Justice Department is the number one threat to election integrity and security in Michigan and in this country. And so we are continuing to work together, and we have been for months, to prepare for all kinds of scenarios that this administration could try to pull, being creative and committed and aggressive to disrupting our elections. But what I know is that as Secretary of State of Michigan, I'm going to make sure that they can't come to our voters.
In Lansing, Democrats have reintroduced the 9 bills that passed both chambers 18 months ago, which were then blocked from presentation to the governor by House Speaker Matt Hall after we won a victory in the Michigan Supreme Court, ordering those bills to be presented. The governor, unfortunately, vetoed them. But Democrats are not giving up. Senator Majority Leader Winnie Brinks said,
"While we were met with illegal political gamesmanship and obstacle after obstacle trying to get this legislation across the finish line the first time around, we have not given up this fight, and we are not backing down. These bills are quality public policy that will lower costs and improve lives for the dedicated, hardworking Michiganders who make our state so great. The people who deserve to trust that their elected officials will abide by the rule of law. And the people who, for years, have been advocating tirelessly for lower healthcare costs and better retirement options for millions of their fellow Michiganders. That's who we're fighting for you."
As Democrats proceed here, they are very intent on getting these bills passed. And if it doesn't happen now, perhaps a new Democratic trifecta next year can take care of business.
Mark, when we talked last week, we speculated that Democrats would be delighted to see pictures and video and sound bites of Trump standing side by side with Mike Rogers, John James, Tom Barrett, pledging their 100% fealty, servility, with their cowardice, completely on display. How about you? I mean, they've got the photos, they've got the sound bites. Do you think that this is going to be a good thing for Democrats and a bad thing for the Republicans?
Well, I think it'll be a good thing, Jeff. I mean, when I was party chair, this would have been manna from heaven. This would have been a gift, right? To have such, the most unpopular president in history, I think even surpassing Herbert Hoover at this point, posing with all these Republican candidates. You don't need artificial intelligence. You don't need to generate images. You've got them. Now, all that being said, this election for Democrats cannot be only about anti-Trump. They've still got to provide the alternative and say what they would do differently when it comes to the economy, to gas prices, to housing shortages, et cetera, et cetera. But Trump is helping them lay the foundation for that campaign. And I, like every other Democrat in the state, welcome to come into Michigan as much as he wants to in the next 3 months.
Yeah. Anybody who's listened to you or I for even 30 seconds over the last 2 years has heard us talk about issues and emotions and circumstances that will be guiding voters in this election. Unforced errors completely of Trump and the Republicans when it comes to the inflationary crisis that American consumers are starting to feel due to his idiotic tariffs and now the idiotic war that he just cannot even conceive of a way to get out of, and driving up gas prices even more. There's so many, as I mentioned at the beginning here, the relitigating COVID. I mean, that just seems like, from a political operative standpoint, yeah, let's bring up a massive failure of the past where Trump looked like an absolute idiot. The Republicans stood by with their thumbs in their asses watching him, his incompetence lead to business failures, shutdowns, makeshift morgues because bodies were stacking up like cordwood. Let's relitigate all that and bring that to the forefront, so voters are thinking about that on top of their current anxiety about the economy. All the conditions are going in the Democrats' favor, except the Democrats' actions in these campaigns seem to be almost like intentionally tying their own hand behind their back. So, putting themselves at a disadvantage that they shouldn't be at. At this point, I still think Abdul El-Sayed is likely to win the Democratic Senate nomination on Tuesday. I will not be at all surprised if Haley Stevens wins at this point. But given the acrimony and the divide in this existential battle for the soul of the Democratic Party that seems to be playing out here in Michigan is the proxy right now for forces across the country and the world. Quite honestly, all the attention is zoomed in on that race. Have the Democrats, regardless of who wins now, set this up in a way that gives Mike Rogers an advantage that he should not have in this climate? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, Jeff, I am very worried about the post-primary Democratic primary world, not just in the Senate primary, but there's some kind of ugly congressional races that we're talking about as well. I see what's going on online. I see the ugly personal attacks. The comments that I think Haley Stevens, frankly, has quite cleverly turned into a positive for her. We'll set that aside for the moment. But what I fear is that Democratic base anger against Trump has curdled and turned into this hatred against each other inside the party. And I worry that is not going to get healed post-primary sufficiently to win the general election. And I urge Democrats to remember who the real political enemy here. It's not your fellow Democrats and whatever candidate they support. It's Trump and the Republicans and the existential threat that Trump poses beyond the economic issues, Jeff, which you and I agree are critically important, but the existential threat that he poses to our democracy. And Democrats have got to stay focused on that, and I'm very concerned that we're not. When I was party chair, these are the kinds of things that I stayed up at night worrying about. I had nightmares about. Mm-hmm. Can we come together after, vigorous but very angry, and in this case, very personal primaries as Democrats, and be ready to win the general election? As you pointed out, it's there for the taking, frankly. The political environment, Trump's unforced errors, the lousy economy. Democrats have got to come together after these primaries next week and not blow this.
Abdul El-Sayed, the campaign has, I think, made some mistakes, some serious mistakes in recent things have come to light recently that have been mistakes. The ogre head on a pike comment that El-Sayed made on a podcast. It seems to me like Haley Stevens has found her footing at a time where the enthusiasm that we've witnessed around El-Sayed continues, but there have been these series of kind of verbal missteps. Him kind of measuring the drapes in an interview where he was talking about, opposing, once he's in the Senate, opposing, John Fetterman and getting, purging candidates or senators like that. I've seen over the course of my decades in politics so many instances like this where candidates start looking past the current election and start getting heady about their future and, their power and king making and, first the Senate and now the world, kind of circumstance. And that is a classic misstep that candidates make. And in at least in some of those instances that are recordings, podcasts, interviews have come out, seems like El Sayed has fallen into a little bit of that. And then there's been the financial disclosure with the foreign properties that he and his wife or his wife's family have collective ownership of, that has made some of the kind of David versus Goliath persona about him maybe a little taken some of that shine off. And then Stevens has just, I think, found footing in a campaign that was floundering. It was floundering for over a year. Unclear message, uninspiring candidate. And what has actually caused her to find her footing and hit her stride at just the right point, yes, it's tens of millions of outside funding, but that's not what his stylistically caused her to find her footing. It's been leaning into the attacks, she's weird, strange, geek, her voice. She's leaned into all that, turned it into this, I'm being attacked for who I am and who I represent, and because we sound like this in Michigan. She's really leaned into that and used it in a way to put herself as the underdog, where she started the race as the clear 800-pound force in the race, and so I think that it could go either way. I'm not going to be surprised if El Sayed wins. My fear is that we see like a 2022 repeat. Well, I know we're going to, of what happened in the Wisconsin Senate race with Ron Johnson and at the time Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, where the Democrat or the Republicans didn't even try to make Ron Johnson likable. Yeah, he's an asshole, he's a mega kook, but the other guy's worse. That's the game plan here. They're going to do that. Rogers against El Sayed. Mike Rogers doesn't have the same assholery persona right now that Ron Johnson already had, and 2026 doesn't look like 2022. 2022 was a pretty good year for Democrats here in Michigan. 2026 looks to be better. I think that Mandela Barnes almost overcame that, lost by less than 1%. That kind of narrow margin, I think the political climate could benefit El Sayed even against Mike Rogers, despite some of the polling that's out here showing he's runs worse than Haley Stevens. I can buy into that right now. He's running worse than Haley Stevens in a head-to-head matchup against Mike Rogers. Does it mean he can't win? I don't think so yet, based on what I've seen, but it's going to matter whichever one of these candidates win. It's going to matter how many of the rest of the party and the party faithful rally around them. Because if the Dems continue this civil war beyond next Tuesday, then Mike Rogers could win this race that he has no business winning.
Yeah, Jeff, with that, there's lots of else going on. All this attention on the Senate Democratic primary has overshadowed, frankly, the ugliness of the Republican gubernatorial primary, where despite the endorsement of John James by Trump, and we talked about the rally in our opening, Perry has not given up. He continues to spend. He continues to attack. He continues to pretend that he is Trump's favorite candidate in the race. What's your sense of what's going on in that primary?
Again, the polling has been all over the place. It looks, it feels, it seems like John James should win this, but I'm not going to be stunned if the guy spending $30 million manages to overcome John James's overblown hype. John James has really run a really he hasn't run a good campaign. He should have been able to make this with the kind of advantages he started with, and then you add Trump's name ID to it, or Trump's endorsement to it. He should have been able to capitalize on that and really turn it into momentum that he doesn't seem to have. It seems like since Trump's endorsement, the narrative has been largely how much the really committed deep MAGA base. It's not there's a division within MAGA between the theological and the secular, and it really seems like the most committed MAGAs, and I use the Matt and Michon Maddock and the other bottom feeder people who like to live under rocks and can't eat with a fork, really represent the foundation of the original Trump support in Michigan. They don't just favor Perry Johnson over John James. They loathe John James. They're out there really dragging him online. And I know the big difference between the Twitterverse and real people and real voters. But it really seems like this could go either way. John James should win, but that the enthusiasm, and we're talking about the infighting on the Democratic side, the lack of enthusiasm if John James wins, I think, is going to be real on the Republican side, and there's a lack of enthusiasm among the MAGA faithful, also for Mike Rogers. He's not somebody they're going to crawl across broken glass for, and so the Republicans are looking at a circumstance where their two top of the ticket candidates they're not completely unpalatable to the wide swath of Republican base voters out there, but Republican base voters are like, I don't love these guys. They're not going to. So casual voters who've turned out to boost Trump in 2 of the last 3 elections and give him narrow victories in Michigan aren't likely to show up in this circumstance, and they're likely to sit out. And so as people are looking at and analyzing what's going to happen in Michigan, they can't just look at what is happening on the Democratic side with the DSA and the traditional Dem establishment and Stevens and Abdul. You have to factor in also the divide or kind of milquetoast attitude toward John James and Mike Rogers that we'll see from the most committed, least likely to vote Republicans. And then you factor in the economic anxiety and the continuing war and the just craziness and corruption. Can't forget the corruption and criminality of Donald Trump. While he's getting rich and his friends are buying personal jets due to his tax cuts, while American consumers are trying to figure out how to buy groceries and fill up their car next week. I think that this is a climate as we're like 96 days out from election that continues to overwhelmingly favor the Democrats. But it seems like the Democrats are doing everything they can to make this a fair fight rather than one where they control the high ground. And so that's my fear.
You're right. There are 2 very flawed candidates that appear to be on their way to the top of the Republican ticket. And that just compounds my concern earlier that Democrats can do very well, can win the top of the ticket and down ballot races. But, they've got to heal these divisions that they've opened up after the primary next week.
More on a republic if you can keep it after these messages.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve on Michigan's public policy landscape? Look no further than Michigan Information and Research Service Incorporated, or MERS. MERS is your go-to source for comprehensive, nonpartisan news and analysis on Michigan's government and public policy. But that's not all. A MERS subscription also gives you access to our powerful legislative monitoring and tracking tools. Stay on top of every bill, amendment, and vote with real-time updates, detailed reports, interactive committee transcripts, legislative analysis tools, and more. Whether you're a policymaker, lobbyist, or just a concerned citizen, MERS keeps you informed with daily updates, exclusive interviews, and detailed reports. Subscribe today and gain access to our extensive archives. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay ahead with MERS. Visit MERS.news to learn more and subscribe. That's MIRS.news. Don't miss out on the insights that matter most.
When most of us think about polling, the focus is on those campaign polls telling us which candidates are winning. But the most important polls are for businesses, local governments, and nonprofits assessing the needs and wants of their customers or constituencies.
Those are polls that guide policies and lead to institutional success. Those polls have to get it right, which makes the choice of a public opinion research firm critical. Epic MRA has been trusted for more than 4 decades to get it right. Our clients have included school boards, statewide nonprofits, corporations, as well as the candidates and news media who rely on us during political campaigns. Whether it's just a couple of questions or a full in-depth survey, we're here and ready to help.
You can reach us at epicmra.com.
Why don't we talk about some other issues that are popping up? And again, we've mentioned data centers before, for example, but this has really emerged nationally as an issue that both parties are trying to grapple with. There's been a good progress on this issue by other Democratic governors, Kathy Hochul in New York, Pritzker, my favorite governor in Illinois, have put out very good plans. They've talked about a brief moratorium so that they can get the regulations in place to protect the environment, to protect consumers from utility costs and so forth. And I think this is an issue that whichever party grabs it first and most effectively could be a big help. And frankly, what I fear for Democrats is that they don't grab this issue effectively and it's seized by the Republicans. And we've seen some of that already in Michigan with some Michigan Republicans, despite their alliance historically with utilities and with corporations and so forth, seeing the populist appeal of, the dangers that these data centers can pose to local communities. And some of the Republicans are, seizing on that. And I hope Democrats don't cede that issue to the Republicans and that we come up with a comprehensive plan that deals with this. I'll also add this, that I think the data center issue is not just about the centers and about, water use and utility costs. Those are all very legitimate and so forth. But I think they've also come to symbolize how people feel about AI. There's an enormous amount of anxiety. People feel threatened by AI. They feel it's going to threaten their job, their livelihood. There's so much uncertainty been introduced by AI. The AI industry has tried to promote it as a glorious future. People aren't feeling that. They are feeling threatened. And on top of everything else, Jeff, you and I have talked about from week to week, now we have this existential AI threat. And I think data centers have come to symbolize that threat. So Democrats, I think, have got to not only talk about and have a plan that appeals to folks for dealing with the data centers, but more broadly, a plan to deal with the anxiety, the threat that AI poses to folks. I think people are feeling the same way they felt about, we had free trade agreements. And, we saw what that did to us here in Michigan. It just devastated our manufacturing industry. And people are seeing this as, just a replay of that AI is just the next version that's going to threaten their livelihoods, threaten their jobs. And the party which best addresses that overall issue and the data center issue, I think could have a big leg up, frankly, in the coming election.
This is an issue that is cut across party lines, and candidates on both sides are making an issue of it. But Trump in the White House and a lot of Republicans across the country are leaning in, like in I think, a very clumsy, dumb way to the big data center side. And again, it leans into the let them eat cake attitude of, Trump bragging about how much money all his friends are making, and his friends are the big data out there who are lavishing his causes, whether it's the ballroom or other things that he's fundraising for, including campaigns, with tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. It's one that I think could be, if it's played right, the Democrats could use Trump's embrace of the data centers. I look at the way Byron Donalds, who's the likely Republican nominee for governor in Florida to replace Ron DeSantis, he has been out there as a data center champion, and he's paying a price for that in his primary and in the likely general election against former Republican congressman running as a Democrat, Dave Jolly. And I think that could provide a playbook for a lot of Democrats out there. Not that they need the data center issue to run on against Republicans, but you can put the Republicans back in a corner and force them to potentially get sideways with Trump in the White House and the funders behind Republican Congressional Campaign Committee and the Senatorial Campaign Committee and Republicans running for governor across the country. And so that's a way that it could become a partisan advantage for the Democrats.
I agree, Jeff. But again, let's bring it back to Michigan. This is another area where Whitmer seems to have lost all political sense the last several months. What does she do most recently? She poses at a groundbreaking ceremony for these big data centers with all these AI execs. And, you just add that to the 9-bill veto, which has infuriated consumers, the labor movement in the state. She reversed herself on line 5. Now she's facilitating the building of that tunnel. This week, we saw Planned Parenthood shutting down 3 clinics where after Whitmer gave the back of her hand to request for financial aid and say, go see the Republicans in the House. And so, again, it just really concerns me when I see Democratic leaders like her embracing, supporting these data centers in pictures like that. And I really hope that, the Democratic Party and its leadership will come to their senses and see that we need to come up with a sensible data center and AI plan, and photo ops with those executives don't help.
Sure. I mean, you and I don't have too many disagreements on things, and we clearly have a different view overall of Gretchen Whitmer and some of her actions. And I'm not going to get into that. I just don't want to fight with you about any of this. But I do want to talk about the her approval rating that came out in one of the polls this week, showing how she's enjoyed throughout her nearly 8 years in office just stellar approval rating. She still does have very historically high approval rating for a second-term governor at the end of their term in Michigan or anywhere in the country, quite honestly. But there has been a noticeable drop in approval among Democrats. My question or concern is how does that play into, I was just talking about the enthusiasm gap. Half of the party is going to be licking their wounds regardless of whoever wins the Senate primary. There's going to be bad blood. Does Whitmer's popularity at the moment, does it throw gas on the fire? Is it something that advantages the Mike Rogers or John Jameses who have no business really being competitive in this environment? Or are there things that Gretchen Whitmer can do in the next 96 days to reestablish her popularity with Democratic base voters?
Oh, Jeff, I doubt the latter. She just seems to be digging a hole deeper and deeper, and I respect you, and I have a different view on that. But yeah, let's talk about the political impact. I think our declining approval ratings, I mean, they're plummeting. They've dropped 20 points among Democrats in the last couple of months for the reasons that I described. And I think Democratic candidates are now, unlike normal times, which you would embrace popular Democratic governor endorsing you, being in your ads, being a guest at a fundraiser. I think now Democrats have to think about that on a race by race, issue by issue basis. Maybe she's still a good guest at a fundraiser and a draw. Do you want to appear in an ad with her? Do you want her endorsement? I think that's something now that, again, people normally would not have to think about, but I think they are going to have to think about given her conduct over the last several months. It's unfortunate that her poll numbers have dropped, but I think it's also explainable why they have dropped. And I don't think that anger is going to go away, Jeff, among the many parts of the Democratic base who think she's basically stabbed them in the back. It's a political reality. I think, again, she can still be helpful in many ways, particularly behind the scenes, and I hope she will be. But publicly, I think she's really hurt her ability to help Democratic candidates.
Let's talk about a couple of congressional primaries that are going on and haven't got nearly as much attention as the senatorial primary for the Dems or the gubernatorial primary for the Republicans, but they're going to be very pivotal in whether or not Republicans or Democrats control the U.S. House in 2027 and 2028. And let's start in your neck of the woods, the 10th congressional, which is mostly comprised of Macomb County and then just a little square of Oakland County geography. You've made an endorsement this week with one of the candidates. Tell us about that and how you see the race.
This race and this district seem to have been forgotten by certainly the National Republican Party. That's why Democrats didn't win it 2 cycles ago, because the DCCC refused to invest in Carl Marlinga, who could have beaten John James at that point. And that kind of backwater view of this race continues. Frankly, contrary to some of the things I said earlier, this primary has not been as ugly. There's been a lot of mail, but a lot of it's positive. Right. I get all that mail from all 3 candidates and I see the online activity and so forth. And it has not devolved into the negativity we've seen in the 7th or we've seen in the Senate primary, for example. And that's a good thing. I think Democrats are going to be able to come together after the primary next week, and they're going to have to, because the Republicans have nominated, the son of the very popular Republican sheriff in Oakland County, Mike Bouchard. Now, again, I think there's all kinds of issues there. As you pointed out, a small, tiny piece of this district is Oakland County, but I do not discount the power of the Bouchard name, law enforcement, the last countywide elected Republican in Oakland County. So Democrats are going to have their hands full, but I think they can still win the race, particularly since I think they're going to come together after the primary, and that's going to be much easier than it is in the 7th. To which, why don't we turn to the 7th, Jeff, and talk about what's going on there? It seems to me, and I do have a candidate that race. I'm with Bridget Brink, that what I think is meddling, overt and quite expensive meddling by the Republican Party there to try to, facilitate the nomination of who they perceive to be the weakest candidate. And it's turned into attacks against the only female candidate, really sexist, misogynist attacks on her. Where I think Matt Nasdem has just frankly become a tool of the Republican Party there, with these bizarre calls for her to drop out because she's a spoiler. I think if anybody could be a spoiler, it's Nasdem. And so it's like, the pot calling the kettle black, so to speak. But that one, and it's been ugly too. I mean, there've been a lot of these attacks about somebody is not pure on issues near and dear to the Democratic Socialist part of the party. And I worry about, no matter who wins next week, Democrats being able to come together and not giving Barrett an easier path to reelection. So I'll get off my pulpit, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I had discounted William Lawrence as a candidate, that he was just a completely shoe leather candidate who had some, a very enthusiastic volunteer base and not a lot of money. And that's how he was most of the race until now, when he's not, and he actually has some money now, as well as an enthusiastic base of supporters. But, I've watched this race closely. I live adjacent to it. I travel through the district. I watch what's happening, and my question is how strong his campaign really is, or if there's an illusion that it's stronger than it is because of its. He's almost run for like mayor of Lansing and East Lansing. And does the campaign really exist outside of that area, or if it does it need to? Will that area provide enough if he overperforms in Lansing and East Lansing and Meridian Township, the Lansing kind of proper? Is there enough vote there? I mean, it's about 30% of the population contained of the entire district is contained there. I'm not just saying he's running for mayor of these cities. Can he win that way? He might be able to. But do you think I'm reading it wrong? Does he have a wider campaign, or is it just largely relying on enthusiastic supporters knocking on doors in Lansing and East Lansing and some of the surrounding areas? And one factor that I don't know is being baked into this is the fact that the primary takes place when students aren't at Michigan State University in East Lansing, in the heart of this district, and where the kind of demographic there that Lawrence enjoys his greatest support with, those voters aren't going to be there in East Lansing. Largely, the students don't come back until later in the month. Is that a factor that's being overlooked in this primary potentially?
Yeah, no, I think that is a factor, Jeff. The other thing too, I mean, Brink is working the entire district. I mean, Livingston County is in this district, and it's not just Ingham County. And and she does have support in the areas you described. We'll see next week how much there is, but she has run a whole district campaign. And we'll see how that all plays out next Tuesday with this bizarre conduct by Mazdam, and whether that's a factor or not, I guess remains to be seen.
I'll go on record here to say that I believe that if Lawrence wins the primary, it's going to be very difficult for the Democrats to get Tom Barrett out of there. Even given the climate, I've been very bullish on the climate being able to overcome candidates who are less than to general election voters on the Democratic side. But I just think that it's very it makes the probability of flipping the 7th, getting Tom Barrett out of there, I think it gives him an advantage. Not necessarily overwhelming, but if Brinks or even Mazdam, who has been a largely invisible candidate up until just recently, if either of them win, their profiles, I believe, match up very strongly against Tom Barrett in his military service and his public service to the state and the country. And so I think either Bridget or Mazdam can stack up well, where Lawrence just doesn't have the resume to stand there. And I don't know that an enthusiastic group of young voters or older progressive voters is enough to win in this congressional district that is much larger than Lansing and East Lansing when it comes to November voters. Well, that's our time for this week. We were planning on ending with our predictions for next week's primary results, but we've run out of time, and I think you can kind of see we've let you know what we think, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what could happen on Tuesday. So we will save those predictions for next week's episode. That's a joke, folks.
And for our audio-only audience, this is a reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. There's a link to the channel on our website.
If the Republic is still standing, Mark and I will return next week. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
A Republic, if you can keep it, is a copyrighted presentation of Michigan Citizens for a Better Tomorrow.